Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Scott Groves. We have the privilege of talking to my new friend, Suzanne Yatim, right? Aslam.
That's right. Aslam.
I thought I had it. But yes, yeah, and I was mentioning right before we got started, I think you're only the third or fourth woman on the podcast in like 50 episodes. So we're super excited. We need more strong-willed women. You wrote this book, which we're going to have in the show notes. We'll probably have on this green screen behind me, called Postpartum Me, a fickle woman's spiral into postpartum depression and anxiety and how the hell she found her way out of it. Sort of, in parentheses.
Sort of.
I love when like the subtitle tells us exactly what we're going to get out of the book. So your husband and I are in the same men's group together. Postpartum is something that my wife struggled with after both of our kids. And I was just reading your bio, like former actress, former Miss Arab USA, writer, like just all kinds of crazy stuff going on in your life. And then it seems like life maybe gets a little bit derailed by having kids, which many women experience. And then this book kind of came out of that experience. So first of all, thank you for being here. And what did I miss in the 60-second Reader's Digest introduction of Suze?
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I probably would just add, I did a lot of human rights work, worked in the Middle East, put myself in some crazy dangerous situations to help further the cause of the rights of children. And then I had children and I was like, well, this sucks.
And are you first generation here in the States? I know that you said that your parents are Palestinian, you're Palestinian. How would you describe yourself, either ethnically or citizenship wise, or where'd your family come from?
Who's first generation? My parents who came here, or me who was born here?
I think it's the first generation that was born here, but I'm sure I get this wrong all the time. So Chris, you're going to have to fact check this.
I've actually never known, because I've heard people say it both ways.
Yeah.
And I think you just want to be first. So I'd love to say like, oh, I'm first generation American. Like, that's cool. But my mom and dad are Americans too.
Perfect. Well, we're going to look it up.
They came here when my mom was pregnant with me, straight from the little town of Bethlehem. It's a little suburb outside of Bethlehem called Beit Sahur. It's called, actually, you've been there, so you might know, it's called the Shepherd's Field.
Yes.
So that's where they're from, the Shepherd's Field.
That's awesome. So, I mean, straight out of the Bible, mom comes here from Bethlehem to America. Why did they immigrate? What did your early years look like? Tell me more.
There was economic opportunity. And of course, there's a lot of oppression and apartheid happening for Palestinians. So it's just difficult to function. And your dreams are very small there. And my dad's always been really attracted to America. And so he came out here when he was 20, lived a crazy life for 3 years, did stuff that he will not tell me about. Every time I ask him, he just blushes.
Nice.
And he went from a little village to LA. Like that's a lot. So then anyway, he went back home, met my mom, they got married, and then they came back here. And so my early years were filled with a lot of Arabic, because I'm the first born. So I speak Arabic better than my siblings. And my mom trying to figure out it's a village life, and
right.
To go from that to just America, which is so big and so crazy. And she actually felt very isolated, which was a really interesting phenomenon, because places like that, everything is wrapped around social structure. Everything is about family and going to see your relatives every single day. And it's not really like that here. Here, it's more about grinding and working. And so there was a little bit of a shock.
Yeah, you should have just married a Mexican, because my wife likes seeing her mom every single day. It's very culturally ingrained to go see the family every day. And I grew up in Glendale, California. So after about 1985, 1986, a vast majority of my classmates were Lebanese, Iranian, Armenian, Turkish. So I mean, like a vast majority. So my favorite people in the world, the McCool family, they are half Lebanese, and I'm going to get it wrong, so I'm not even going to say. But I was over at their house all the time, and I was just shocked. I'm like, wait a minute, your uncle comes over every day? Like every day after work, he comes over. Like I see my uncle on holidays and like birthdays, maybe like the major holidays. And I was just so confused growing up, because like we had a great family. We had a pretty close family. I was over at my grandma's house a fair amount, but it was like, wait, I just couldn't, I didn't get it. And I was like, your uncle comes over every day. And she was like, yeah. I mean, she would just look at me like I had, I was a unicorn or something because I didn't understand why the family got together all the time. So was there any extended family for your parents here in the States, or was it like they were really isolated because your dad was following the American dream?
He was following the American dream. When they came here, they came straight to Michigan. And in Michigan, it has the largest population of Arabs outside of the Middle East. And so, but they decided to move to somewhere a little what is it called? I think it's called Ubly. It's in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I'm not very familiar with it.
Yeah.
Because I was just there when I was really little, but it's mostly like a Polish town.
Okay.
So they didn't know anybody. And then they dealt with a lot of, they didn't like brown people up there. So my parents didn't stay there very long.
Yeah. Yeah. Upper P, I would say until recently is not exactly very ethnically diverse.
I guess not. I didn't know until very recently that they kind of fled because they were like, we don't feel safe here anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy because I grew up born and raised in Los Angeles. I grew up in a very like ethnically diverse elementary school, junior high, high school. My dad and his best friend used to introduce each other either as each other's parole officer or as gay lovers. So the idea that not that many decades ago, there were places in America where you would not feel welcome if you were brown or a foreigner or gay, like that just doesn't even register on my radar, But then you realize like, oh, no, the country is very diverse and not as progressive as you would think as, growing up, born and raised in Los Angeles.
Right. Yeah. Those small towns are small towns for a reason.
Right. So tell me about your journey after that. How does one go from fleeing the Upper P to becoming Miss Arab USA? That seems like a pretty big jump.
Well, there were several years in between. So we moved to St. Louis. My dad's uncle offered him a job in St. Louis. So we lived there. And that's my heart. That's where like people say, where are you from? I say St. Louis. And
Nice.
then they get confused because they're not expecting me to name an American city because that's not what they're asking me. They want to know like what my ethnicity is, but they don't know how to say it. So they go, oh, where are you from? And then I go, I'm from St. Louis. And then my chest just swelled because I love St. Louis. And then they're like, oh, and then you could tell that they're like, what do I say now?
Yeah. They're like, no, what's your race? That's what they really want to say.
You want to know why I'm brown? Cool. And then I'll, I just like to make them a little uncomfortable. It's funny.
Yeah.
I'll explain the story and I've got like a little spiel. But then anyway, so I spent all my life in St. Louis, went to Webster University, which is a private liberal arts school, spent a lot of money for no reason. Got a degree in international human rights, worked a little bit back in Palestine, doing some just normal, dangerous Palestinian shit that we do, putting ourselves in harm's way just to, fight for the cause. And then I moved out to Phoenix and I was acting in St. Louis, but then I had heard when I was moving out here that there is a film scene. So I moved out here and I got into film, found an agent, was doing commercial work, married Qasim, your buddy. And then I had heard about this pageant for Miss Arab USA, and I'm not a pageant girl. That's not my jam.
I was gonna say, so this wasn't like 11-year-old where your mom's dressing you up in tiara.
No, this was like 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I was an actor and a human rights activist. And I was like, oh, this is, like maybe this could help me like with my career and help me get a platform so I could talk about these really important topics that were so important to me. So that's why I did it.
Got it. Yeah. And I would be remiss if I didn't go down this rabbit hole a little bit. So I'm going to, but this could be a 3-hour podcast all on its own. Let's talk about Palestine and human rights. Cause I think one of the great travesties of kind of our modern progressive movement in America is the things that are framed as human rights violations are maybe just like, it makes me a little uncomfortable. Like if I'm at the grocery store and somebody refers to me as a her instead of a him, like, that's a little uncomfortable. I would rather you not refer me to as a her, but like, I'm not going to say that that's like a physical assault against my body and that's a travesty against my human rights. So I think one of the dangers of the progressive movement right now, which definitely has some legs and has a lot of credence to it, one of it is like, are we being violated or are we just being slightly offended? And so when people say human rights violations, when we're talking about the conflict between Israel and Palestine, or when we're talking about human rights violations in, like, I don't know, sub-Saharan Africa, it's a little bit of a different spiel than like, well, I didn't get my government stimulus check as quickly as the other guy, and that's a human rights violation. So can you talk a little bit about your work in Palestine, what that means to you, maybe help us frame the conflict for people that are ignorant, that haven't been to Israel, or just, you know, they only read one side of the news or the other? Is that a fair question to ask you?
Yeah, didn't know we were going to talk about this, so I have to like brush up on my little spiel here. Okay, so when I was little, when you're Palestinian, you grow up with this profound sense of understanding justice because it doesn't exist in our world. It didn't exist for my parents. When my mom was 12 years old, she was arrested and sent to jail. At the age of 12, the Israelis came and arrested her entire class as collective punishment because of a cousin of hers that was making a lot of noise. And they do those things, and it's okay, and it just doesn't really make headlines. So my entire life I'd been hearing about this stuff. And when I was really little, and I bring this up because sometimes you just have to simplify it, but when I was really little, my dad, trying to explain this stuff to me, would say, imagine you had a house and then somebody came in one day and they're like, we're taking over the whole house, but you can have the bathroom. By the way, if you need to leave the bathroom for any reason, you have to get permission. And I'm not telling you that you're going to get the permission. So deal with it. And that's sort of what happened on, of course, a giant scale. So now what's happening is there is a profound shift in ethnic cleansing is sort of becoming like the easy way to get things done. So instead of like just straight up, like just killing people in genocide, what's happening is they are bringing in people from the rest of the world who have Jewish heritage and saying, because you have Jewish heritage, you have the right to be here. But in order to be there, you have to kick out people that already live in these homes. So I've seen this with my own eyes. People have had their homes demolished over and over again, more than once. I met a guy whose family, his house was demolished 5 times because they try to demolish it. They try to build these homes to make way for what they call settlements, and they're Jewish only settlements. It's really, really, really intense. And these settlements are beautiful and big and modern. And they cut off water to the Palestinians in order to make those beautiful places function. And these are people who've been here for hundreds of years. And suddenly, some of the people in our town, they can date back to like 1,000 years. And suddenly they don't have the right to exist in that place anymore. And it just doesn't make any sense. And then there's a whole religious aspect of it, which as Americans, and my family's Christian, there is a population. That's where Christianity started, right?
Right.
Did you go on a Holy Land tour?
I did. This was the coolest thing I've ever done in my adult life. A good friend of mine was in special forces, like Green Beret. I don't know, maybe he's Delta Force now or something crazy. And he was doing a 2-year officer sabbatical where he was in Israel doing like an international studies program. So I tell you all this because when I visited Israel, he had like the license plates where you can go in and out of anywhere else. He was like authorized to carry a weapon. He had some special ID. So it's like we went to the church that's at the site of the manger, supposedly in Bethlehem. And it's like instead of waiting in line for 4 hours, we just walk right to the front.
Oh my gosh, I do the same thing every time I go. I go from the place where you exit at the bottom.
Yes, exactly. You just walk in the back. And so like everywhere going in and out, people being stopped by, armed guards on either side. And it's like all that stuff just right through the checkpoint. So it was the most fascinating experience and also kind of the most like VIP experience I've ever had. And the 2 weeks that I was in Israel, Jordan, I guess Bethlehem would be considered Palestine, right? By your estimate. And some people would probably argue with that. We just had an amazing experience all over the country. And it was the best 2-week vacation of my life.
That's so cool. I'm so glad you got to experience that. Jordan too. I've spent some time in Jordan and it's a very, very cool place. It's modern, but still holds on to its heritage at the same time. I love it. I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah. And you mentioned the fact that you and your family are Christian. I feel like so much of this argument or debate or what I think I know gets framed by, Muslim versus Jewish, right? And the way that I've kind of catalyzed the thought process in my mind, and I don't have a particularly strong opinion one way or the other on Palestine or the West Bank or disputed territories or whatever the case may be, or settlements. Like, I just don't know enough to have a strong opinion. But I've always thought about it like, okay, first principles. If the Muslim countries in the region laid down their arms, let's just say hypothetically, and that's what they did. I don't think, I could be wrong, I don't think Israel would try to destroy them. I do think if Israel laid down all their arms, there are probably some Muslim countries or factions that would try to destroy them. And so it's like, in my mind, it just catalyzes like, well, I have a gun, my neighbor has a gun. If I put my gun away, he's going to take over my house. If he puts his gun away, I'm just going to let him go water his front yard. That's the very simplistic, like, lizard brain in me. That's kind of how I think of things. Tell me why I'm wrong or what I don't understand about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Because I want to learn. I want to know from somebody who's been there, boots on the ground. But I just can say I'm ignorant. I don't know. So is it a Muslim versus Jewish thing? Because you kind of just enlightened me that there's a lot of Christians in Palestine. So what am I missing about how I'm framing that debate in my little tiny fourth grade lizard brain?
It's not a Muslim versus Jewish thing. In fact, it's a purely political thing that often uses religion as an excuse to get the things that they want. So, shocking that politicians would use religion. I know. Please go alert the media.
Yes.
Something new.
I'm shocked that I'm shocked.
So, for example, this is not like a Jewish issue. We have Jewish brothers and sisters that are the bravest people that stand up with us, literally side by side with us when we're protesting or fighting or doing whatever. And they're standing up against soldiers that are their own, the IOF, the Israeli Occupation Forces. Those are their people, and they're saying, no, what you're doing is wrong. So what I always find really, really helpful to people that are outside of the situation is how many Israelis or worldwide Jews are pro-Palestinian. And this does not make them anti-Semitic. This does not make them anti-Jewish. They're just not happy with the government of Israel using their religion as an excuse to hurt people. That's it. And that's what they're doing. The government is saying, oh, we're a Jewish-only state. And America's saying that they're the only democracy in the Middle East. How can you be a Jewish-only state and then claim to be this like democratic godsend? That's a separate issue. But there's Israeli human rights groups that are fantastic. There is one group called, and they're one of my favorites, they're called Breaking the Silence. These are former Israeli soldiers who are boots on the ground, as you said, started doing things that they found appalling and then stopped. And a lot of them go to prison for it. Like if they refuse to serve their term, their sentencing, their term. So like, I think at the age of 18, every Israeli has to serve for two or 3 years.
2 years, yeah, I think.
So some of them they're like, well, we're not going to finish. And they're like, okay, well, you're going to jail for that. And they are willing to go to jail for this because they understand that what they're doing is wrong. They're intimidating people. They're just killing people in the streets. I've talked to soldiers. I'm not kidding. Like it's so surprising to me how people can be looked at as subhuman. I have talked to soldiers on the rooftops with my American accent, like, cause the flat roof. So like I was on one rooftop and there was this guy who was a soldier, but he's from Boston and he's on his rooftop and he's got his gun and I'm just talking in my American accent. I'm too far away. So I don't think he could tell I was Palestinian. And he's like, because they're dogs. I'm like, why are you doing this? And he's like, because they're dogs. Like they're not even human. Like they truly feel this way. Right. Not everybody,
of course.
But the people that are putting a gun in your face, yeah, they feel that way. And they are just convinced that what they're doing is right. And they're doing this like they're like on a mission from God. And it's really, really fucking hard to argue when somebody's like, God said this is for me. Right, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the government's using this to their advantage. And when you so this is something that I'm personally worried about. If it's a Jewish only state, they're going to start taking over places because it's important to Judaism. So eventually, because they're getting closer and closer to Bethlehem with their big settlements. But at some point they're going to say this particular part of Bethlehem is really, really important to Judaism. And they're going to want to take it over. Where does my family go?
Right. Huh? Bringing some lightheartedness to this conversation. Have you ever seen the George Carlin special where he goes on a whole comedy rant about how to solve this?
No, I love
Oh my God.
him.
Okay. You need to look this up when we get off this call. George Carlin does this whole rant where he's like, I don't understand the problem. Jews in Florida have already figured out how to solve this whole problem. He's like, timeshares. Timeshares is the answer. The Muslims get Jerusalem 3 months out of the year. The Jews get Jerusalem 3 years out of the year. And the Palestinians get it 3 months out of the year. Timeshare, they already figured it out in Florida. And somehow you guys can't figure it out in the Middle East. And it's like, I knew that would make you laugh because George Carlin is the man. He can bring levity to just about any situation.
Well, I mean, isn't that the point of what I was saying with the book, is that you want, there's so much truth in comedy, and
Absolutely.
being able to present a situation that's very difficult in a lighthearted way just makes it, I don't know, it makes it easier to absorb.
Totally.
And you don't want to end a call and be like, I can't, I feel heavy and I'm depressed and I'm whatever. So
yeah. I've only had one of my podcast guests get off depressed, but that's because we were talking about political stuff. So we'll shift moods and go to your book, Postpartum Me. Before I give you my take on what postpartum depression is, because I'm a dude, I'll probably never experience that. Give me kind of your arc of like, I think we're married, we decided to have kids, we have kids, and this is what I'm feeling. So tell me a little bit about like what you thought motherhood was going to be, how it all came to be. I mean, I know how you guys came to have children. I know that part of the biological rut, but like what did you think motherhood was going to be? What did you experience? And then where did postpartum come to the equation?
So I'm very, very blessed with a lot of self-worth. And I feel like really good about myself. And I've always really loved myself. And I've always really loved my life. I've loved who I am. That's fantastic.
That doesn't come through at all. So
you can't tell. I'm really working on it. Oh. So that's just how my dad raised me and my siblings. And we actually, one day as adults, we were like, we all are just like that. Like we're all like good in ourselves. And I think my parents just did a really good job. But so after I had children and I felt like I wasn't that person anymore, it was horrible because I was like, but I liked her. Bring her back. Where'd she go? But anyway, so I never really like thought about kids in particular. I was like, well, I'm sure I'll have them. That's what most people do. And then I was about to turn 30 and I was talking to Qasim. We were in Sedona and we were like, if we're going to do this, we should probably do it soon. And Qasim was trying to talk me out of it, even though he always talked about kids when we first started dating. And he was trying to talk me out of it. And I was so confused. And then I didn't know what to do. And then I finally had this moment where I was like, wait, people don't regret having children, but we'll be 50 and we could regret not having children.
Yeah.
So the safe option is to have the children.
Right. It's a good cost benefit analysis. You don't meet a lot of 50-year-olds that are like, Jesus, I wish I wouldn't have had kids. They were the worst thing that ever happened to me.
That's exactly right. I have yet to meet those people. I'm sure they're out there. So it just seemed like, as you said, it was a cost to benefit thing and the math made sense. So I got pregnant with Sammy and things were fine. And then like around 8 months, things got bad. And it was really weird, like the triggers that created those things. So I'm at a birthday party. This is in the book. I'm at a birthday party and I'm 8 months pregnant. So, my stomach is huge. There's no hiding it. I'm very obviously pregnant. Right. And nobody will talk to me about anything else. And I felt like I was so much more than just a pregnant lady, but they just wanted to know the gender of my baby. They just wanted to know how far along I am. They wanted to know where I was giving birth. They, all this stuff. And there was like a lot of stuff happening in the world at that moment that was really upsetting to me. And I wanted to talk about it. And I hate small talk. And that's all that was happening. But now it was baby small talk. It wasn't even like the weather small talk.
Right.
And
so what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
What's your husband's name? Yeah.
Yeah. It was just baby stuff. And, oh, you're having a boy. I had a boy. Here's what you need to do with boy moms. And I was just like, oh my God, this is not who I want to be. And I went home and I felt like the heaviest feeling I have ever felt in my life. I felt physically heavy. I laid down and I couldn't get up. And I just thought like, man, I'm really sad about this. I didn't realize until actually I was writing the book that there's also perinatal depression. Like depression can occur not just after, there's postpartum, but then there's actually depression that can occur during. And I didn't know that that's what I was experiencing. But do you watch Harry Potter or read Harry Potter?
I love Harry Potter. I read all the books. Yeah.
God, we can be friends now officially. So I reference Harry Potter a lot, but it felt like Dementors were there and they were just sucking all the joy. Mm-hmm.
Totally.
1,000% is how it felt. Like I just was like trying to like hang on to any good thoughts and I couldn't do it. And J.K. Rowling that's what she used. That's what they are. Dementors that's her symbolism of depression. And I just think it's so perfect. Why bother writing anything else about it? Like right. I just sort of deferred to her. So that's how I felt. And then, I had Sammy, and I'm sure you could understand this. When you first have a baby, there's a surge of hormones, and then the hormones leave your body, and it's really intense. So there's like the baby blues that occur, did your wife like just burst into tears?
Oh, 100%. It was miserable.
Yeah. And for no reason, like nothing happened.
Yeah.
And you're shivering and your body hurts because labor is really, really traumatic on your body. And I had it all natural. So like I felt everything, no drugs. I wasn't at a hospital. I was at a birthing center. I felt everything. And it was so fatiguing. And you just felt like you never recovered from that fatigue. Right. And then of course you're like up all night and nursing hurt and like everything. There was like nothing positive about this experience.
Right.
And then all the hormones were making it worse. And the problem was I did not know I was depressed. So you have the baby blues and then they go away, but mine didn't go away. And it just stayed and it got worse because at first it was like all the physical issues and the fatigue and stuff. And then I was like, oh, my child's ruining my really awesome life. I had a great life. And then he showed up and now everything sucks. And I'm just stuck here in this little condo. And I couldn't like see further than Sammy ruined my life. That was it.
Yeah.
It was really, really hard. And so for like half the time I was experiencing this, I didn't actually know. I was like, being a mom sucks. Like, why do people do this? This is terrible. I had no idea I was depressed.
And the guilt, right? Because everybody's telling you, this is supposed to be the most amazing thing. This is this bundle of joy, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, no, this like train wrecked my shit.
Yes. It was so frustrating. God bless my mother. I would tell my mom, he's driving me crazy. I can't stand this. I'm so tired. And she would go, no, it's so wonderful being a mother. Like she wouldn't like hear it because she didn't know. And she just wanted me to be happy. And then, oh man, the guilt was really bad. Cause okay. So especially when you're the kid of an immigrant, you understand gratitude and you understand like what it really means to suffer. And my parents have actually really legitimately suffered and like feared for their lives and their families' lives. And so for me to be like, I'm sad in Scottsdale in my condo where I don't have to work because my husband makes good money. Yeah. I'm really sad. Like, that's how I saw myself.
Yeah. And
I was like, man, you're just being a little bitch is what you're being, you're being soft. Like, you're fine. Your life is fine.
Yeah.
Calm down, and I couldn't like, it was like just this, I felt so torn because I was having these feelings that I couldn't control. I couldn't control my thoughts. And then the other part of me, the more analytical side of me was like, shut the fuck up. You're fine. Like, stop complaining.
Yeah. You got it really well.
Mm-hmm. So what's the problem? Like, and it was driving me crazy because I could hear both of them and I didn't know what to do about those feelings.
And how long did that kind of conflict, desperation, depression, how long did that last? Did it go away immediately because you found the solution, or did it just kind of wane over time? Because you seem pretty stable now.
Yeah. So the first thing is that if you've never been depressed before, it doesn't occur to you that you might be depressed, because I don't know what that feels like. And I've always been a very even-tempered person. And so like that thought never entered my mind. And then when I found out that it's most likely postpartum depression, I just got more depressed because I was like, I was depressed that I was depressed. And I was like, well, fuck, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? And I didn't want to like, people take meds and it's fine, but that's not something that I wanted to do. And I wasn't ready to like go to therapy and talk about it yet. I went to therapy with my second kid. And then like the anxiety kicked in and that made it worse. So it was like a year of just dealing. So like probably 6 months before I realized I had a problem. And then about 6 months of trying to figure out like, well, now what? Like, what do I do with this problem?
Yeah.
And I wasn't very proactive because who wants to be proactive when you're depressed?
No one in the history of the world. I mean, that's the problem, right? It's like we were doing an interview last night with a guy that runs a Veterans Administration services, like a Chamber of Commerce for veterans. And he's like, yeah, one of our goals is to get it out there into the public zeitgeist of like, there is an easy way to find all your benefits as a veteran, because when you're depressed or you're suicidal or you have drug addiction problems, you're not the person surfing the internet being like, I wonder where my veterans benefits are to help me get out of this deep, deep well I'm in. It's like, no, you're in the deep well. You're not thinking about getting better. So I can only imagine how bad it is as a mom, especially when everybody's telling you how great you should feel and the miracle of life. And isn't this bundle of joy amazing? And you're like, dude, I just want to crawl up in a ball and not talk to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh, thank God he's so healthy and you're healthy. And yeah, it was so what do? You just stop talking to people about it, right? Because obviously you're saying the wrong things.
Yeah. Something's wrong with you.
Something's wrong with you. Yeah. Because Scott, what kind of person doesn't like their child? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, it's a monster. That's who, like, obviously a bad person. So then I'm like, I'm a bad person. When did this happen? How could I? And like, the thing is like, with my work, so I lobbied in DC for the rights of child soldiers in northern Uganda. I worked in Palestine trying to help children like just have the right to go to school. And so going from that and being like, I love kids and kids are like the most precious thing in the world and we have to protect them, to being like this guy right here, like my whole life is around this little thing. And it was weird because like I loved kids, and then now I actually had one and I'm like,
yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah.
I got to give a shout out to my buddy Ryan, who unfortunately we don't talk a whole lot anymore. We just kind of drifted apart. He told me something when my wife was pregnant with my first kid, which thank God he did. And probably every father needs to hear this. There's exceptions to the rule, but I think this is how most men feel. He was like, Scott, he's like, I got to tell you something, man. For the first year or two, everything about having a kid sucks. Your sex life goes to hell. Your wife feels like shit. They cost a lot of money. They don't have any personality yet. All they do is eat and cry and shit. And you're going to feel as a man like, did I do something wrong? Am I a horrible father? Why am I not connecting with this little bundle of joy? He's like, and then somewhere around a year and a half or 2 years, when they start to have some personality and they can talk, that's when the father gets really, really connected. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I wouldn't take a bullet for this kid. I will kill somebody if they look at them cross-eyed. And thank God he told me that, because when my wife was going through her own, version of postpartum, I was like, okay, I'm also feeling a bunch of these horrible things. But somebody prepped me for that. And I feel like women don't prep women for that, because like you just don't have that bro talk.
No, we don't have the bro talk. I could really use that bro in my life. I'm so glad that Ryan did that for you. We don't have the bro talk. And then we're also supposed to be like, actually, I just posted this on my Instagram thing. It was a quote from my book about like how we're like women are goddesses and mothers are goddesses. And, and like goddesses aren't just these like beautiful floating things that floated around on clouds. They were like fierce and pissy and emotional. And that's what you are when you have a child. And you're right. Like Qasim would come in from work and I'd be frazzled and I'd just try to hand him the baby and I'd be like, you're late from work and where are you? And I need you here. And he's like, I run a business. I can't just like clock out at 5 o'clock. That's not how it works. And I'm like, I don't care. I need you here. Right. And I couldn't he lost me. I don't think he saw me for a really long time. I don't know who he saw, but it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And then the anxiety would kick in and it would just make things worse. Cause I'm like, I'm fucking up my marriage and I keep saying the wrong things. And does Qasim hate me? And cause he'll just get like really quiet and he doesn't want to say anything cause he doesn't want to rock the boat, but I know his face. And I know when he's really quiet and like emotionless, I actually know that he's experiencing a lot of deep emotions. And I'm like, oh no, he hates me. And so I just would like spiral internally and I just have all these thoughts in my head. Yeah. And I would just deal with all of them on my own. And I'd have arguments with him in my head.
Right.
That never saw the light of day. And it was horrible for our relationship.
Yeah. I remember my wife waking up one time and she was like super pissed. And I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, well, I kept getting woken up by the baby and that kept disrupting me from my dreams. And in our dreams, we were having this massive fight. And I'm like, wait, so now you're pissed off at me because of something you dreamt about me? I'm like, I do plenty of stuff in the waking hours for you to be bitter at me, but you can't also add on the stuff that I did to you in your dream. And she's like, well, I'm sure if you did it to me in my dream, you've probably done it to me in real life. And that was my subconscious just like manifesting it. And I'm like, all right, dude, well, I can't win this conversation. Let me have your mom and your cousin come over. I'm going to go to work for 32 hours. And guys can just hide and work. It's so unfair. Like we can just say like, we got to be the provider, got to take care of our wife and our new kids. So I'm going to go to work. And I just got to hide and work for 2 years. And not surprisingly, the year after my son was born, year after my daughter was born, we had record-setting years at business because I would just hide and work instead of go home and help my wife.
That's very interesting. I wonder if we like did a study on that.
Oh, I'm sure. Like
how much people's companies thrived at that point. Wow. That's a really cool thought. It's a really, really sad thought, but it's a very, very cool thought. We had, I was really frustrated because I was like, what are our roles here? Like, okay, fine. I'm the stay-at-home mom. So I'll clean the bathroom and I'll have dinner ready for you when you get home. But does that mean like you're not responsible for childcare at all? Like, am I just on the clock 24 hours a day? And, and he'd be like, oh, I have a meeting with Michael, a coffee date. So, that's where I'm going. And I'm like, so you just get to get up and go. Yeah. And it's just that easy. Whereas like, if I wanted to get up and go, I have to rearrange my entire world if I wanted to get up and go on my own, let alone if I needed to go somewhere with the baby. So I'm like, what are our roles here? Like, when did we decide that just because I'm the primary caretaker, it means that I'm like the only caretaker? And it got really frustrating because I got super resentful that he had the freedom of movement to just be like, and just go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man, you're basically replaying a couple years of my wife and I's life. Cause it would be like, oh, well, I've got to go do this business meeting. And in fairness, it was a business meeting with a bunch of realtors and or loan officers and or whatever. It just happened to be either at a bar or around a cigar. She's like, yeah, you can just escape and smoke cigars whenever you want. And like, I'm here with the kid. And I'm like, yes. And there is like some business function to that, or we're doing like a coaching session or whatever the case may be. And it's totally unfair to her, but also knowing that your husband and myself, if we are the only ones working, like we have this internal drive. I think your husband and I have had so many text message exchanges on the side on like how we're basically like brothers from another mother. Like we're very similarly wired. And so both of us, I'm sure, just as soon as kids were born, go right into like provider mode. Like, oh, we got to get the 529 plans maxed out. We got to start investing for the future. Oh shit. Now we got an extra body or two to travel with us. And we just go immediately into provider mode, which I think for a lot of guys is the best that we can do. And it's noble, but I'm sure at some point our wives would just like us to slow down and help us with the childcare.
Yes. So I remember when we got married, it was like 2 days later, we were up in Flagstaff, in Northern Arizona. And we were just walking and he was like just walking like this. And he was just looking down and his brow was furrowed. And I'm like, what is wrong? Like we got married 48 hours ago. Why are you sad? And he's like, I have to provide for you now. I have to take care of you now. And it was this, like, he was so serious and so nervous. And then after we had a baby, I saw it on his face before he even said it out loud. I was like, oh no, he's having that thought again. But it's so much because I'm an adult and I can go take care of myself if I needed to. Sammy can't. Sammy's a little baby. And so he just like, he went into overdrive with like, oh, I'm your caretaker. I'm your protector. I'm your all these. And it was really, really beautiful to see when I could see it.
Right.
But what I mostly saw is he just wasn't here.
Right. You didn't see the fact that he's trying to like come up with the plan to have the business to max out the 529 plan so the kid can go to a better college. You're just like, all I know is this kid's crying and I don't have somebody to hand him off to.
Yes, exactly.
So how long did this last? Like, did it last until you had number 2? Then you went through it right again, and then you were just now coming out of the haze, or how long yesterday? Sweet, just in time for this interview. Perfect.
So at about a year, and again, like this book wasn't written to provide medical advice.
Right.
I'm not a therapist. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just kind of here to hold your hand. So at about a year, Sammy could start talking and he could say words. And oh my God, I was like, I don't have to anticipate your needs as much anymore. I could actually understand you a little bit. And I don't have to guess all the time, even if it was just like hungry, water, whatever it was. it just made my life a little bit easier. And then, man, when they're one's my favorite age, because they're like walking and they can say a word or two. They're not mean yet. And I loved it. And so I actually really enjoyed Sammy at the age of 1. He was just so cute. And they're like exploring everything. They're finally figuring things out. And it's just so cool. So around that time, I started to get a bit better. But then when Ronan came when Sammy was 2 years old, and the anxiety and now it was anxiety and it was panic attacks, and it was massive amounts of loneliness, because now I didn't have just one baby. I had 2 babies, and everything got harder to do. Like leaving the house was harder. So I just didn't do it, which meant that I was by myself more. And that was really, really, really hard, because you do need that village. And I opted out of that village because it was just too hard to go find them, So that was really, really rough. And then I noticed when Sammy started going to preschool 3 days a week, he'd go to preschool just half days. And so he'd have, there'd be like a 2-hour block while he was gone that Ronan would take a nap, and it'd be in the middle of the day, and I would get to recharge. And that did a lot. Like noticed my panic attacks went away. I stopped having weird anxiety for no reason at all. Cause I still get bouts of anxiety here and there, but it'll be for a reason. Like my kid's sick and I'm freaking out and, whatever. And, but they would just be like, I'd just be sitting there and then I just get anxious. And so around that time when I could finally just get 2 hours to recharge, that did a lot. And I think the thing that people don't understand, they're like, oh, Mom, I'm going to send you on a vacation so you can have 4 days to yourself, 5 days to yourself. But all that means is when you come back, you're doing the same old grind, and you don't know when that grind is going to end. So for me, and I think a lot of moms, having consistent breaks does a lot more than just looking forward to that one vacation in 6 months, but you got to be on until that day,
That's interesting. You mentioned the village aspect, and I'm going to make some weird roundabout possible correlation causation. And so A, I hope you don't take this the wrong way. And B, I hope you know that I don't have this 1950s mentality of women should be barefoot and pregnant and not work. But I'm wondering this idea of village, right? If you go to a more traditional small town America, and I'm thinking of a bunch of my Mormon friends who had kids earlier in life and whatnot, the baby comes or the grandfather's sick or whatever. And it's you don't have a choice. Your fucking neighbors are coming over and bringing the casserole. They're coming over to ask if you want to take the kids, cause mom needs a break, or grandma, is taking care of grandpa or whatnot. And I'm wondering almost kind of rich people problems, first world problems, when we're now in a world where we expect strong-willed women like yourself to be working, have a career, go to grad school, do this, da-da-da. Then it's we tend to, as a society now, especially kind of in the coastal, more progressive areas, we squeeze in kids at 30 or 35, or even now some people 40. Do you think that strong fierceness, which is kind of the modern day women, is diminishing that community or that village where you're man, I was in a part where I felt I needed to step out and go search out the village, where I'm until recently, that village probably would have been there for you unsolicited. Do you think there's some correlation, or am I just making this up in my head and I'm crazy?
I think you might be a little crazy, but I don't know if this is why you're crazy.
Okay.
I think there's a few different balls in the air. I think in one aspect, don't you feel like people are busier now than they used to be?
My initial reaction is I want to say yes, but it wasn't that long ago where somebody in the house had to churn butter for 3 hours just to have some fat sustenance. So it's I want to say yes. And then I also want to say life wasn't, I don't want to romanticize it. I don't think life was that easy in the 50s or the 30s or whatnot. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know.
I think people are I think we do more. I think we put more on our plate. Yeah. And we seem to have more priorities outside of the home. Mm-hmm. And so your neighbor is just very busy. Your neighbor might not always have time for you. So that's one thing. The second thing, I think the one problem, my friend gave me a really good piece of advice. She would be my Ryan. She goes, don't be a hero. And I was like, what? She goes, if somebody offers to help, you say yes. Don't say no.
Yes.
Don't say no, because we're so used to being I got it. I'm fierce. I got all that stuff. And I'm an independent woman. I got this shit. But do you really want to be that person all the time,
Right.
especially when you have a kid and like you're not the only person raising your kid, you know? You want that community. Like I don't know how to teach my kid the stuff that Qasim teaches them. Like
Right.
he has traits that he teaches them and I have things that I teach them. And you would hope that there's other people in that sphere that are also lending a hand. So I think a lot of it is that first of all, we don't know how to ask for help.
Yep.
That's really, really hard. And then secondly, have you ever asked somebody like, are you okay? And then they go, yeah, I'm fine. And you're like, all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But are they okay?
Totally.
You know, and I think like, we're not really, really listening. We're just doing the like, hey, you look sad. You all right? Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's like, so you did your part. Like you did what you needed to do. You asked if they were okay, but you didn't really like get down and really, really ask and really push it. So a lot of it is like, we need to be better at asking for help, and we need our support system to be better at like knowing when we need help and not letting us say no. And that might be kind of an unfair thing to say. I'm aware of that. But I think like if people had these tools before they had kids and they knew that this was what's going to happen, maybe they'd be more equipped to be like, no, you're not okay. I'm going to take the baby, or I'm going to cook you dinner, or whatever it is.
Yeah. I don't think that's unfair to say at all. I mean, your husband and I belong to a group where, for dads, where we're specifically trying to get past that superficial level. Hey, how you doing? Oh, great. Okay, cool, man. Like, that's what every dude says. Like you could be in the middle of like drug addiction, getting divorced, child hates you, losing your job, and every guy will be like, yeah, it's going pretty good. I'm okay. Yeah, sure. Okay. And it's like, no, you know, and a mentor of your husband and I, John Vroman, you know, he always asks very pointed questions of like, hey, Scott, what's going best in your world right now? Or, you know, hey, Scott, what's something you're really struggling with right now? Because like, I'm not just going to openly volunteer, hey, John, you know, here's the thing that's going on in my marriage or my kids or my business. But if somebody asked you and you're in need, you know, the frame of that question can really change things. Like when somebody says, how are you doing? I'm like, oh, are you a waitress? Are you getting me like an iced tea? Because that's the most superficial question. Like, how you doing? You okay? Yeah. It's like, well, of course I'm going to say okay. So yeah, I think maybe as Americans specifically, especially busy Americans in like kind of a postmodern society, we probably need to get better at asking better questions of those people we care about. So I want to know for context, how old are Sammy and Ronan now?
They're 4 and 6.
Okay. We have exactly the same age kids.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My son's 6. My daughter's 4. We went through everything you're saying. I could just replace you with my wife, Karina, right now. And we went through the same exact thing. So, so then what causes you to say, okay, I went through this, I'm out of it, sort of, as it says on the cover of your book. What motivates you to write a book? Like, are you an author by trade, or did you want to start a coaching business out of this? Like, how does this all materialize into this book I have in front of me?
I have no desire to be a coach.
Perfect.
My best friend is one, and it just sounds terrible. Just so hard. So I was always really, I think as an actor, I was looking for a creative outlet, and I wasn't acting anymore. I tried so hard to keep working when I had the kids, but it was just hard, auditions and fittings and then shoots would run late and it's just too hard. So I think I was looking for a creative outlet, and my husband and I, like one of our creative pastimes together is we love writing scripts. And so I think I was using a little bit of that script writing and thinking about some of the stuff that I was going through. And I just started writing for my own benefit, my own sanity, and like sort of trying to figure things out. And then I was getting frustrated because nobody would talk about this. So I went to a place that's so cool. I need every city to have this place. It's called Modern Milk.
Okay.
And I found this when Sammy was, oh man, I don't know, like 3 or 4 or 5 months old. It's a place for moms and babies. It's so cool. It's here in Scottsdale. And they have like, I went there because they had a yoga class, but the yoga class is specifically for moms who have babies. So you go, and it's not a baby yoga class. They have those too, but you bring your kid into the class, you put them on top of your mat with a little blanket, and they lay there and you do yoga. And then if you have to stop to nurse your kid, nobody gives a shit. You just sit down and you nurse your baby, and your baby poops. Nobody gives a shit. You just sit down and you change them, or you can go outside and change them. But like, it was just this safe space for moms and babies. And so I spent a lot of time there because I was like, this is the safest place I could be outside of my home. And so I tried to talk to people, and what I was telling you earlier, like people would be like, oh, I feel guilty that I'm leaving my kid and going back to work. But nobody was ever like, I fucking hate my kid, he ruined my life, and like, I wasn't getting that. And I'm like, I can't be the only person in the world who feels this way. I'm not that special. So I started writing it with the idea of like, let's talk about some of the stuff that is almost shameful. You are not supposed to say you don't like your kid. You're just not. But I didn't like my kid. And so what am I supposed to do with that? And so I just wanted to make it okay. And I wrote the book with that in mind, that like, it's okay. And you're feeling this way, not because you're a bad person, but because you're going through stuff and it's really hard and it's okay. So I wrote it with that in mind, but I wanted it to be funny. So I wrote it's in the form of journal entries, where I'm just sort of talking to myself, and I felt like it works really well that way, because then I can say the things that I can't say out loud if you're just saying it to your diary.
Right.
And I bring up a lot of Harry Potter because I'm kind of nerdy. I bring up Friends a lot because I'm kind of nerdy. I just say it. I just say it all. I just say like every annoying thought. I say every fickle thought. Because, one entry will be like, I can't stand this. Why did I do this? Please tell me this is a dream. And I walked around for like 3 months trying to figure out, I was in the Matrix. I was like, is this real? Is this my reality? And then the next entry will be like, he's so cute. Oh my God, I can't stand it. He's so darling, and because that's what you feel. You're not like, depression doesn't mean that you're like in a constant state of sadness.
Right.
That's not what that is. There's these ebbs and flows to it. And some days you forget you're sad and you're having a great conversation. And then all of a sudden there's like this flash flood that comes over you for sometimes the dumbest reasons, sometimes the really important reasons, but sometimes it's like the stupidest shit can just set you off.
Yeah.
And you're just shrouded.
And, I kind of believe, yes, we can meditate. Yes, we can train our mind. Yes, we can, work on the Tony Robbins positive thoughts. But I kind of feel like my mind's going to do what my mind's going to do, right? Like if I'm like kind of mentally checking out, or if I'm a little bit more in a depressive state or a little bit more in a manic state, the brain's going to kind of do what the brain's going to do. So knowing that you were probably always going to go what you were going to go through, having written the book now, experienced this, talked with people about it, what advice would you have given yourself, when you found out you were pregnant with Sammy? Like what advice would you have given yourself to kind of get through this, or deal with it a little bit better, or just be accepting of it? I don't know what I'm looking for, but like if I forced you to be a coach, even though you have no interest in doing it, and you could go back in time 7 years and coach yourself, what would you have told yourself?
I think I would have probably explained to myself, man, a lot like your wise friend Ryan, that this isn't what motherhood is, that this is a very small part of motherhood. And this isn't forever. And it is okay to ask for help. So like, if I knew I was depressed earlier on, I could have gotten the help that I needed. And been able to like acknowledge it and say it out loud. Like, you guys, I'm dealing with some postpartum depression. I need you to help me with the baby, and not be ashamed of it. So I think I would have been more brave in saying I'm not okay. And, also not trying to like take it all on myself. I had just a lot of like, I'd have all these feelings and I wouldn't tell anybody. I just kind of keep it to myself. I don't know why I did that. I'm not a very emotional person. And, saying things like I'm lonely is those are two really hard words for me to say. But the fact of the matter is that I was lonely, and it almost made me feel like I was a failure as a human being.
Yeah.
Like I just failed like humanity in general by feeling those feelings, and not living up to my expectations of what motherhood is. And the fact of the matter is when if you can get a woman to talk about how hard it is, there's no end to the things that they would say on how hard it is. But when you're, I'm sure you remember when you first got married, you like romanticize the idea of being a parent, and you guys talk about what you're going to do and how your kid's not going to ever watch TV and how your kid's going to be this perfect little child. And you're going to homeschool.
Yeah.
And there's just all these, like, we romanticize it so much to our detriment. It's really dangerous the way we view things. I call it montaging, like you just like have the music and you have these scenes. Totally. And it's amazing. And the day-to-day life is not like that at all. And I think if I knew that that's what it was and it wasn't a montage, Um, yeah, I think I would have been at least like a little bit more prepared, but instead I was thrown into it and I'm like, what the fuck? This is not what they said it was supposed to be like.
Yeah.
They lied to me. They lied to me is how I felt.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because the end of that Ryan conversation is he goes, yeah, so like everything sucks about having kids, except for the fact that you have kids. Cause when they do something, you know, like
Yes.
we've been having a lot of challenges with our son, Gabriel, who's about to turn 6. A lot of challenges just with, you know, acting out and physicality and stuff. But when I see him like giving himself the little affirmations of like, I'm going to teach myself how to ride this bike. Dad would be so proud of me if I learned how to ride this bike. And then all of a sudden I come home from a business trip and he's riding the bike without training wheels. And I'm like, oh, this is what it's all about. This is the moment Ryan was talking about. Like everything about having kids sucks except for you have kids. And it's crazy.
That's so hard to understand if you don't have kids.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Totally.
Like try explaining that to a person who doesn't even know if they want kids. And you're like, I promise you it's going to suck, except it's going to be wonderful at the exact same time.
Yeah. So confusing, right?
What does that mean? I don't know.
You know, something we didn't touch on yet, but you mentioned it in a few of your journal posts in the book. And I know my wife was feeling this. After we had Gabriel, we went to Puerto Vallarta for like our first away trip, left the baby with grandma. This was about a year and 3 months. And I've got a picture of her outside the hotel that she's so proud of in her bathing suit. She's like, I finally got my body back. I'm finally feeling good about myself. And literally the week after we got back from Puerto Vallarta, oh, I'm pregnant. Here comes number 2.
Oh, no.
So, you know, we talked a lot about the mental, but let's be honest, like having kids just wrecks the female body for pick a time frame, 6 months, 6 years, 60 years, whatever. That can't help, right? Like you're having all these emotional things, you're having these hormonal things, you're having these second guesses and thoughts. And then also you're like, oh, my body feels like shit and doesn't exactly look the way it used to look.
Yeah. Yeah. It really fucks with your head. And I spent all this time, like as an actor, look, as much as I love acting, I also know it's a lot about the physicality and like, you know, I needed to look a certain way to get parts. Just kind of was what it was. And so like, I had to think about my looks a lot. And then I had kids and, you know, I'm like covered in spit up and I haven't showered in 3 days. And did I brush my teeth today? I don't even know.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like my husband comes in, I'm like, hi, honey. Like, I don't, you know, I just like, I feel like shit. I assume he thinks I look like shit. And it's just like, that messes with you. Cause now you're like, oh, here's the number one relationship in my life. And it feels weird and you feel weird. And it just, and that really, really messes with your head. And then of course, like women, we already have body image issues, like just in general. Totally. And then, you know, you throw motherhood into it and then you see a picture of a hot girl and you're like,
yeah, it just ruins you, right?
Ruins you. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, however your husband dealt with that, it had to be 100 times better than how I dealt with it. Because if my wife was on this podcast with us, she would make sure that we brought up the time when she was pregnant with our first child. And she was quite large because she was about 9 months pregnant. And she asked how she looked. And I was like, kind of like the cover of National Geographic's. I don't know. And she would make a point to bring this up right now about how horrible I made her feel.
God. Oh my God.
So whatever your husband did to not help the problem, I did way worse. So tell him he's doing great.
He did great. He never made me feel bad about myself. It was all in my head.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah. No, some of it was definitely me. Cause I don't get that whole, oh, you're glowing. You look beautiful. I'm like, no, it looks a little weird and it's a necessary evil to like continue the species. Yeah. It's like, you look like Penguin with a big belly, like the Penguin. I'm talking about Danny DeVito in the movie. And I'm like, you know, I've never ever felt like the glow, you know, like when Demi Moore did her famous, like posing on the cover of Vogue, naked and pregnant.
Yeah.
And a lot of women and men were like, that's beautiful. She's glowing. I'm like, she kind of looks gross. Gonna be honest. That's not the Demi Moore I know. So I'm a horrible human being because I did say that out loud to my wife and she will never forgive me. I'm sure it'll come up at my funeral.
I don't blame her. I think she probably thinks about it more often than you know.
Oh, I know. I always have to tell her how beautiful she is just to make up for that one slip. And it just kind of like came out of my mouth like a comedian. Like, you know, even if I was really thinking it, it was just like, it was like a knee-jerk reaction. And it's like, oh, I wish I could take that one back.
You know what I will say though about Qasim? I remember once like things came to a head and he goes, what do you want? And I was like, oh, and man, those few words like threw me for a loop because he wasn't asking to what we were talking about earlier. he wasn't asking, how are you? He was like, what do you want? Like he was kind of fed up with the way I was acting. We didn't know that I was, spiraling. And he's like, what am I supposed to do for you? What do you want? And I didn't actually know what I wanted or needed.
Right.
And that was quite an kind of an awakening, because I'm like, oh, so here's somebody who wants to help me, but I'm not letting him, and I don't know how to tell him what I want because I don't know what I want.
Right.
And there's so many layers to this. But the question was like, it was like a slap in the face. What do you want?
Yeah. Yeah. That's powerful. I'm going to use that question next time we're having a debate about dinner and we're on like the 5th choice for dinner. You're like, oh, you want to have BJ's? No, I don't care what we have, but not BJ's because I don't really want pizza. Okay. You want sushi? I had sushi 2 days ago. Well, what do you want? I don't really care. Okay, how about Mexican? Mexican again? I'm like, well, clearly you care. So what do you want, honey? So I'm gonna use the what do you want.
She's not gonna call me later, is she?
No, for sure. Well, she might. I don't know, but it won't because she's mad. She'll be like, hey, thanks for enlightening my husband.
She already poked her head in earlier.
Oh, my wife already poked her head in earlier. She's like, who are you talking to in there? So she'll enjoy this one. So I got 3 closing questions for you. And one of them is going to be specific because you're mom, and 2 of them because we always ask these questions. One is, as a mother, now that you've got a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, you're pretty much out of the woods on this craziness and the anxiety and the postpartum. What do you think is the best thing you're doing with your kids as a mom? Like, what's the best parenting advice you have that you're doing with your kids?
Oh my God, why would you ask me this and not prep me like hours and days beforehand?
That's the best question.
Jesus, what is the best thing I'm doing as a parent for my kids? Okay, this might sound woo-hooey, but it's the first thing that came to my mind. I'm trying so hard to make sure that they listen to themselves, that they listen to those internal thoughts and those internal feelings, because every child has that. And at some point it goes away. Mm-hmm. And I really, really want them to keep that intuition and not let it go away. Cause we're all like fighting now to, try to be enlightened and try to get it back and try to listen to that quiet voice inside of us. But we had it. It was there. And right now, Ronan and Sammy have it. And I'm just trying really hard to make sure that it doesn't slip away.
Amazing. That's a great one. I think this comes full circle to like honoring your parents, what you said earlier of like, hey, something you guys did with us allowed us to be okay with ourselves and happy with ourselves and good people. They must have done something to nurture that inner voice.
I don't know what it is, but we're all like that. So yeah.
That's amazing. And then, it's been a pretty rough couple years, to say the least. Now that it seems like we're more or less getting back to normal, and I don't really care where people fall politically or on masks and vaccines and all the craziness, it feels like we're going to be getting back to normal here soon. What are you looking forward to? Whether that's you personally, you and the family, you and the kids, like, what are you looking forward to getting back to or experiencing or enjoying? Like, if we can reach some normality in our political discourse and, living with Omicron or whatever the next version is, like, what are you looking forward to getting back to?
I think, and this might sound not very nice because I just spent all this time talking about my children, but my relationship with Qasim kind of took a hit, which I'm sure you understand and experience when you have kids. And we are in such a good place right now that I'm really looking forward to like going out and traveling. We're going to Costa Rica in August.
Nice.
And it's just the 2 of us. And I'm like, oh my God, like we get to do this now. Like our kids are at that age where we're like, oh, you're staying at your uncle's or your grandma's or whatever. And I don't feel bad about it. And now I get to focus, like I get to split my focus and focus on my marriage. And it's so fun. Like it makes having a fun and solid marriage makes everything else so much easier to handle, especially when you're dealing with kid issues. So I'm really looking forward to just having those little getaways here and there.
That's awesome. And then last question, maybe the most important one, favorite movie and why? I feel like you can learn so much about a person when you ask about their favorite movie. And maybe you have 7 of them because all 7 Harry Potter movies are your favorite. Or was there 7? I
don't know if you can see.
Yeah, I see them back there. I got you.
I have like 16 of just one of the book. Anyway. Okay. This is not, I feel like because I was an actor, I'm supposed to have this like really like artsy film.
No, please don't. Please.
I'm supposed to say that I love, but I don't.
Yeah.
Here's my favorite movie, The Bourne Identity.
Really?
Yeah.
Excellent movie, by the way. Excellent movie. But you could have given me 1 million guesses. I would not have come up with The Bourne Identity.
It's so fun. I love like spy action thriller movies, like Angelina Jolie's movies, like Evelyn Salt and things like that. Like man, I love that stuff. I think it's so fun.
And obviously, since you read for pleasure, I got to give you a book recommendation now. There's a guy named Jack Carr. He's an ex-Navy SEAL sniper. And even when he was a Navy SEAL the whole 20 years, he knew in his heart of hearts he wanted to be a author. Like, he grew up a voracious reader. He went into the SEAL teams because of all the military books that he had read. And he's written this series. They're now on book 4. Book 5 comes out in like 4 months. And just Google Jack Carr. It's called C-A-R-R, Jack Carr. It's called the James Reese series. The first book is called The Terminal List. And Terminal List is like Jason Bourne meets Tom Clancy international spy thriller. It's like if James Bond was American and believable. It's such a good series. Like, in that first book, I'm a weird guy. Like, I don't really cry at the important stuff, at my parents' funeral, I'll man up and I'll wear the Oakleys and I'll deliver the eulogy. But if it's like a lukewarm episode of Grey's Anatomy, I'm like, oh God, Bill died of like some crazy liver transplant. So I probably cried 3 times during that book, and I don't want to spoiler alert any of it, but a little tear welled up in the left corner of my eye. So The Terminal List by Jack Carr. If you enjoy the Bourne Identity, you will tear through these books in like a weekend. So,
oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay, but tell me real quick, because I want to judge you back. What is your favorite movie?
Oh, so hard. It goes back and forth between like Braveheart, Saving Private Ryan, and Top Gun. It depends. It's super typical. Like, I'm a child of the 80s, right? And then I was in the Army when Saving Private Ryan came out. The year that Saving Private Ryan lost the Oscars to Shakespeare in Love, talking about like being the super artsy movie, I stopped watching the Oscars, never watched it again, because I'm like, come on, dude. That was Saving Private Ryan was like a masterpiece, and Romeo and Juliet in Love or whatever it was called, Saving Shakespeare, or I don't know, Shakespeare in Love. That was like an artsy movie about actors being pretentious about being actors. Like, give me a break. So I'm with you. I like the action stuff. But if I had to pick one, it'd be Top Gun. I think it would be Top Gun.
Okay.
Yeah. That'll change from week to week. Say again.
I've never seen it.
You've never seen Top Gun?
I'm not a fan of him.
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of him personally either, but I love every one of his movies. So you should.
That's so weird.
It's easy.
Anyway, that's a different podcast on a different day.
Yeah, different podcast. So go watch Top Gun and read The Terminal List. And we're actually a couple months ahead in our filming schedule. So this will probably be dropping a little bit closer to summer 2022. But when it comes out, we'll send you everything. We'll send you some clips and whatnot. And I just want to say thank you for being on. And maybe what we'll do is we'll have this podcast sometime with my wife on the other side of the table, so that we can.
Be so much fun.
She can tell you all the things I screwed up in her experience with postpartum.
You could just get up and leave the room halfway through.
Totally. You girls could kill it.
Yeah.
You can just film like 2 hours on everything men should be doing, and then I'll watch my own podcast and like get a lesson on how things should work.
And then you could present it to the front row dads, and we'll just come full circle and save everybody's family.
Perfect. Well, Suze, I really appreciate you. Thanks for being on. And we're going to have you back on at some point to talk more about this, because I suspect your book's going to have a lot more impact than you think. And it's going to turn into some type of coaching mastermind support group. Call it whatever you want so that you don't get scared off by coaching. But I think you're going to have a lot of impact, my friend.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun talking with you, Scott.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Talk to you soon. Ciao.